We often imagine samurai as noble warriors living by an elegant code of honor. A life of katana duels, loyalty, and glorious battles. But the truth? Being born a samurai, especially during the Kamakura period, was brutal, stressful, terrifying, and often deadly. Today we're diving deep into why it actually sucked to be born a samurai in the Kamakura period, 1185–1333. And trust me, you'll never look at samurai the same way again. When most people think of samurai, they imagine stylish armor and powerful swords. But in the Kamakura period, they weren't elegant heroes. They were land managers, tax collectors, and sometimes borderline gangsters. Most weren't rich or respected. They were military landholders trying to survive. Being born a samurai meant one thing above all: you were disposable. Being samurai wasn't a career, it was a birth sentence. You had to serve, you had to fight, you had to obey. There was no retirement plan, no university to escape to, no alternate lifestyle. You were expected to be loyal to your lord, even if your lord was corrupt or incompetent. And if you failed to serve, there was only one honorable exit: seppuku, ritual suicide. So from the moment you were born, you were told how to live, when to fight, and sometimes when to die. Japan's first military government, the Kamakura shogunate, was run by elites like the Hojo clan, not the shogun. Samurai were stuck in the middle: enforcers, tax collectors, and farm overseers. Their job was to keep the land productive and quiet. If farmers resisted taxes, samurai were expected to use force. Most battles weren't heroic duels, but brutal skirmishes against hungry peasants. The Kamakura period began with the devastating Genpei War, and its trauma shaped the entire era. Young samurai entered adulthood scarred by violence, with no concept of trauma recovery. You either learned to bury your feelings, or you died. Survival meant fighting neighbors and proving loyalty, even if it meant killing people you knew. That was the reality of being born a samurai. Narrator. The Kamakura economy ran on land ownership. Rice fields meant wealth, power, and influence. So naturally, every samurai was obsessed with protecting their land, or stealing more. Narrator. This created legal warfare, not court trials like today, but violent disputes, false documents, bribes, and assassinations. Narrator. There were hundreds of land lawsuits every year, and most ended in violence. Narrator. So yes, samurai trained with swords, but the real samurai weapon was paperwork. If you lost your land, you lost your livelihood. And then, chances are, you'd lose your life. Many people believe samurai followed Bushido, the way of the warrior. But during the Kamakura period, Bushido didn't exist yet. There was no formal warrior code, no spiritual purity, no romanticized heroism. Most samurai were opportunistic and survival-driven. They allied with whoever seemed stronger. They betrayed when necessary. They fought for land, not ideology. Some historians call early samurai land pirates. Others call them armed landlords. Either way, the truth is clear. Samurai weren't noble knights. They were survivors in a chaotic system. In 1274 and again in 1281, the Mongol Empire invaded Japan. Samurai rushed to defend the shores. They fought brutally. They risked everything. But here's the problem. The samurai expected rewards, land, money, rank, for their efforts. But the Mongols didn't conquer anything. There was no land to distribute, so the government couldn't reward the samurai. Meaning, thousands of warriors fought, hundreds died, and nobody got paid. Imagine risking your life and your entire family's future, and your leaders say, "Sorry, we can't give you anything." That's exactly what happened, and it led to massive anger, rebellions, and financial chaos. So being a samurai wasn't just dangerous, it also didn't pay well, at all. Samurai families lived under constant pressure. You had to maintain weapons, you had to pay servants, you had to manage rice production, you had to maintain your horse, and you had to still show loyalty with gifts to your lord. So many samurai families ended up in serious debt. Some even sold their children to survive. Marriage? It wasn't romantic, it was political. Women were often sent away to marry strangers to secure alliances. Being born samurai didn't mean honor. It meant responsibility, stress, and sometimes sacrifice of everything you loved. Let's address the biggest myth. Did samurai really believe in honor? In the Kamakura period, yes and no. There was an idea of loyalty, but it wasn't always noble. It was fear-based. If you didn't follow orders, you could lose your land or your life. Honor didn't mean do what's right. It meant do what your lord needs, even if it feels wrong. True honor often meant obedience, and many samurai died obeying foolish orders. So, why did it suck to be born a samurai in the Kamakura period? Because you weren't guaranteed glory. You weren't guaranteed wealth. You weren't guaranteed respect. What you were guaranteed was pressure, fear, responsibility, and the constant risk of losing everything. Being born a samurai wasn't a gift, it was a burden. Thanks for watching. If you'd like a part 2, covering samurai punishments, marriage customs, seppuku myths, and more, let me know in the comments. And remember, history is never as clean as legend. For a samurai child in the Kamakura period, childhood wasn't a time of innocence. It was training. From age 4 or 5, boys were introduced to riding and weapons. By 15, they were fully responsible for serving their lord. Discipline was intense. Crying was weakness. Fear was unacceptable. There was no room for personality, only duty. The pressure only increased with age. Your lord expected loyalty, and your ancestors were believed to be watching. Failure didn't just shame you, it shamed your entire bloodline. When you were born a samurai, you were born to die a certain way. Samurai didn't fear death, they feared dying wrong. Dying in battle meant honor, but dying from illness? Shameful. Dying from old age? Pitiful. Dying from a farming accident? Embarrassing. So when samurai went to war, some hoped they would die in combat because it was the only honorable ending. But this belief brought its own curse. Young samurai often acted recklessly, charging into battle without strategy, desperate to die in a blaze of glory. Many did, and history never remembered their names. We imagine seppuku as a noble, controlled act, but the Kamakura reality was bloody, painful, and chaotic. The idea of a calm, poetic ritual is a myth from later centuries. It was often improvised and sometimes not even voluntary. Your lord could command it. Hesitation meant assisted seppuku, a polite word for execution. Behind the myth of honor was fear and pain. But what about samurai women? History tells a colder truth. They lived under strict social control, often as pawns in political alliances. Marriage was paperwork, not love. Divorce was easy for the husband, but devastating for the wife. If he failed, his family could be sold or enslaved. Their fate depended entirely on him. To be born a samurai woman was to be born powerless. Forget luxury, forget traditional feasts. Most samurai lived far from glamour and close to hunger. Rice was precious, not always eaten because it was usually used to pay taxes. Some samurai farmers survived on millet, barley, thin vegetable soup, foraged plants, occasionally fish, if nearby rivers weren't taxed. Show impoverished samurai home scene recreation. Disease was common. Tuberculosis, dysentery, typhoid fever, infections from untreated wounds, tooth decay leading to fatal illness. Medicine existed, but mostly herbal guesswork. Many samurai died from infections, not swords. And then there was winter. A bad harvest could mean starvation. Some samurai families were forced to sell children just to buy food. Honor meant nothing when your stomach was empty. Samurai practiced a mix of Buddhism, Shinto, and ancestor worship. Religion offered comfort, but also pressure. They believed their ancestors were watching their actions. Every failure felt like a betrayal to generations of warriors. But religion also taught them to accept suffering as karma, that pain was purification. This led many samurai to suppress emotions, believing sadness was weakness or a spiritual flaw. In time, samurai became known for their stoic expressions. Not because they lacked feelings, but because they were never allowed to express them. Silence wasn't strength. Silence was survival. Movies often show samurai drinking sake with companions, sharing emotional brotherhood. The truth? Most samurai lived isolated lives, tied to land, tied to duty. Friendship was risky. Alliances could change. Your closest comrade might be ordered to kill you if politics shifted. Trust was rare. Solitude was common. Many samurai left behind death poems, short verses written when they felt death approaching. These poems weren't dramatic. They were often quiet, lonely. Example, real death poem. I write this at dusk. My life has been long, but I cannot remember joy. That was the heart of the samurai experience. A life lived for others. A death faced alone. Consider the real lives of samurai. Hatakeyama Shigetada was a loyal retainer of the Kamakura shogunate, but during a political shift, he was falsely accused of betrayal and executed. His loyalty didn't save him, it condemned him. For others, like Wada Yoshimori, a single rumor could lead to their entire family being hunted down and wiped out. Perhaps the most honest description comes from a torn diary found centuries later. We are not brave, we simply have no choice. Narrator. Honor didn't just control life, it controlled every interaction, every decision, every family relationship. Samurai were constantly judged. How they sat, how they walked, how they spoke, how deeply they bowed, the way they held their sword. Even in peaceful times, appearance mattered more than happiness. Your public image mattered more than your private feelings. Narrator. One wrong expression could spark rumors. Rumors could become accusations. Accusations could end your life. Narrator. The samurai lived not only under government control, but under constant social surveillance. The samurai sword, the katana, is often seen as a symbol of honor. But for many samurai, it was a weight they could never put down. It represented war, family duty, violence, social pressure, personal sacrifice. A death they didn't always choose. Being born samurai meant being born into a life already written. A script you couldn't change. And maybe that's why the samurai learned to walk quietly, to endure silently, to fight without expecting reward. Because deep down, they knew their lives didn't truly belong to them. They belonged to history. If you made it this far, you now understand the samurai like most people never will. They were warriors, but also victims. They were strong, but often broken. They were respected, but rarely happy. Thank you for watching. If you'd like a part 3, exploring the rise of Bushido, samurai ghost stories, forbidden romance, or famous betrayals, let me know in the comments. And remember, the past is always more human than legend tells us. Like, subscribe, share for more history.